The FBI's official 9/11 investigation codename is PENTTBOM. Interestingly, the PENTTBOM codename and the translation of the BOM in the codename for the word bombing was just the other day confirmed again by still FBI Director Robert Mueller in Time magazine just this May 9th. The FBI's SIOC Strategic Operations Center filled to capacity on 9/11 and remained that way through PENTTBOM, the FBI's cryptonym for Pentagon Twin Towers and Bombing. Now that's very fascinating because the official story, of course, in the 9/11 Commission report and all the media that follows their lead is that bombs really weren't involved at the World Trade Centers or the Pentagon. But the Pentagon, I now know from interviewing eyewitnesses, expected a terrorist attack on the building that morning, but with explosives of some kind. Bomb-sniffing dog teams were at the Pentagon Metro stop at least as early as 7:30 a.m. I've personally interviewed a Fort Monmouth TDY auditor named Michael Nielsen, as well as the very famous Army area survivor April Gallup, for 2 hours with under oath testimony on videotape. And they both stated that there were bomb-sniffing dog teams in the Metro stop. So the Pentagon expected some kind of an attack, apparently with explosives that the dog teams were sniffing for that moment. I was walking on the Pentagon's innermost corridor across the courtyard when the incident happened. I heard two loud booms, one large, one smaller, and the shockwave threw me against the wall. This is one of many photographs that were originally from the Department of Defense that are available on the web. Mechanical engineer Michael Meyer has stated it is physically impossible for the C-ring wall to have failed due to the impact of plane debris of any kind in a clean, neat circle. Like the one seen here at the inside of the C-ring is the signature of a shaped charge explosive and definitely cannot be, he said it was impossible, from an impact from any kind of plane debris. Meyer spent years in aerospace, structural design, and the design and use of shaped charge explosives. If a plane or any object, any impactor, would come in at an oblique angle, which the official story says, and goes diagonally through 3 rings, that you're not going to have a perfectly round exit hole. If it's the front of a fuselage or even a round engine, it would have to impact coming perpendicular to the wall. The official story, of course, says that there is a single exit hole on the inside of the C-ring. This is a graphic taken from the Washington Post immediately after 9/11 from Pentagon sources, DoD sources itself. There are 3 exit holes listed from the Pentagon's own immediate sources to the Washington Post after 9/11, not just one. This is an aerial photograph that the Pentagon provided to all the media right after 9/11. You can see it on the web. This is the so-called official exit hole right here. But there are 2 others that in turn perfectly match these 3 so-called exit holes from the Pentagon's own release data, and here it says exit holes, plural. The government lied about inside explosions. Do you think it's telling the truth about the one and most famous outside explosion in the 5 famous frames from the 2 videotapes of the security cameras in the parking lot of the Pentagon that the videotapes were released in the Moussaoui trial in August of 2006? The 85 videos that were confiscated by the FBI, there was an FOIA request. The FBI FOIA officer was honest and did an analysis of those 85 videotapes and came back to the person who requested it that there were only 2 of the 85 that in any way could be interpreted as showing an impact on the building, and those are the 2, and they do not show a plane.
This is Dan Dicks here reporting for Press for Truth, and the clip that you just saw was taken from my documentary film titled Press for Truth Presents 9/11 Decade of Deception. And as you can tell by the title of that particular film, it was released on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. In case you didn't know, guys, yesterday was the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. So, of course, I was resharing my film, which, by the way, had over 2 million views before YouTube deleted my channel. I've since re-uploaded it here. If you haven't seen it yet, now is a good time to watch and share. And I would reiterate that to you guys. If you have not yet seen my film, Press for Truth Presents 9/11 Decade of Deception, please give it a watch on Rumble. I'll put a link in the description below. Don't forget to follow me on Rumble as well if you are not yet subscribed or following me here. But yesterday I was posting a lot, obviously, on the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, sharing my film, sharing, images like this, asking the question, does that look like a gravitational collapse to you? Posting the images of the crash site at Flight 93, where they want us to believe that an airplane disappeared into this tiny hole in a field in Shanksville. Posting images of the questionable images in regards to what happened at the Pentagon that day, footage of what happened at the Pentagon, and clips like this that I retweeted from Richard Gage, who I've interviewed many times, showing large sections of massive chunks of concrete being expelled and pushed outwards, just defying free fall physics, and obviously implying that explosives must have been involved here. Now, I wanted to touch on this video in particular that I was sharing, which is showing very rare footage of the Pentagon following the attacks. And as I ask in this question here, look very closely at this footage and see if you can tell me what's missing. And obviously, there's no plane parts. Like, if you pause it right here, why isn't there any wing damage to the side of the building or the windows here? There's just a small section that has collapsed. And if you go through this, you'll see it's very revealing that there's no plane parts whatsoever. Anyways, this led me to coming across this particular post where somebody was pointing out how, Judicial Watch sued and had a Freedom of Information Act request to get these 5 frames released, which obviously don't show an airplane or anything that even would resemble such a thing. And I wanted to share this with you. This is someone who chimed in here, a guy who says, he's a 32-year USAF combat vet and a survivor from the Pentagon. He says, I was there. I personally identified the cockpit on the inside of the building where it came to rest between the A and B rings, penetrating the B ring wall, and aircraft parts on the outside of the building, including instruments, panels, seats, wiring harness, engine parts, actuators, clearly marked. Aircraft skin, landing gear, and some human remains. I've worked aircraft crash sites since I was 18 years old, and I know what I witnessed and identified. It was a Boeing 757 and American Airlines markings with passengers. And so I ended up commenting on this post, and I said, perhaps you should read up on the declassified Joint Chiefs of Staff, military document Operation Northwoods, and that might explain these parts that you found. And today I was trying to, find that comment that I made yesterday, and I can't find it anywhere. It's just not here anymore. But what I did find is this. He said, FYI, if I detect you're a truther, you will be blocked and lying replies hidden. Your lies hurt the surviving families and disrespect the dead, and I'm not obligated to publish you. Occasionally, I will keep 1 or 2 of the more insane truther lies on my timeline to be ridiculed by the sane people on this post. So according to him, I am allegedly one of these insane people, and my post has been hidden. And the post that I was talking about brings up Operation Northwoods, a declassified military document from 1962 that I would suggest would expose to a great deal what happened on 9/11 and how this particular man may be involved without even knowing it. So I'm going to talk about all of that, guys, and much more in this video. Really quickly, before I do, I'd ask that you check me out here at subscribestar.com/pressfortruth if you appreciate my efforts to bring you this info, guys. Here you can do $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever is with your means is very greatly appreciated. I cannot continue to do this work without you guys. So if you do appreciate my efforts to bring you this info, please take 1 minute today to check me out at subscribestar.com/pressfortruth. You can check the top link in the description below of whatever video platform you happen to be watching this on today. All right, guys, there's so many things that we could cover when it comes to what happened on that particular day. I could talk for days and days about this. This is one of the moments that essentially launched my entire life and career with Press for Truth. I woke up in the late 90s, and when 9/11 happened, I was, immediately the red flags were essentially going off on like day 2. I had an inkling that this was an inside job, and I began investigating it, and I've looked into it for over 20 years now and made a feature-length documentary film about it. I mean, I did the Toronto hearings. It was a 6-hour-long DVD. We then edited that down into a comprehensive 2-hour film. So, as I said, I could talk about this for days, but if you want to get it all summed up in a nice, neat little package in a 2-hour film, please don't forget to check out Press for Truth Presents 9/11 Decade of Deception. Once again, this is a free documentary that I've released, as are all of my documentaries, and I would encourage you to watch it if you haven't yet. But today I wanted to address this guy and this comment, how he's blocking what he detects to be truther replies and hiding them. And all I was suggesting was that he read up on Operation Northwoods, and maybe he would have a better idea of all of these parts that he found. So what was I talking about? Well, let's get into it here in case you're not familiar with this, and even if you are, it's a good idea to rehash some of this information, because false flag attacks are still used to this day, and this is one of the declassified documents that show exactly how they do this. Now, I want to show you some parts that have been emphasized to just make this blatantly clear. As you see here, it was launched in March of 1962. This is by the Joint Chiefs of Staffs. It's since been declassified. And the subject of this is justification for U.S. military invasion in Cuba. Justification for military intervention in Cuba. Obviously, in the early 60s, the U.S. had a very deep desire to invade Cuba. They wanted to just go in there. But obviously you can't just, preemptively attack a country that's not attacking you. It would not look good on the United States. They had to come up with some sort of reason, some sort of an excuse to get the American people and the Western world behind the idea of invading Cuba. They had to come up with a reason to do so, and this essentially is the plan, signed off by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the early 60s. And here it is. This plan incorporated projects selected from the attached suggestions, and they have a number of suggestions here of what they think may be the way to go. And these are very revealing in how false flag attacks work today. Or from other sources that should be developed to focus on all efforts on a specific ultimate objective, which would provide adequate justification for U.S. military intervention. Such a plan would enable a logical buildup of incidents to be combined with other seemingly unrelated events to camouflage the ultimate objective and to create the necessary impression of Cuban rashness and irresponsibility on a large scale directed at other countries as well as the United States. The plan would also properly integrate and time phase the courses of action to be pursued. The desired resultant from the execution of this plan would be to place the United States in the apparent position of suffering definiable grievances from a rash and irresponsible government of Cuba, and to develop an international image of a Cuban threat to peace in the Western Hemisphere. So that's the plan in a nutshell. They go on to say, since it would seem desirable to use legitimate provocation as a basis for U.S. military intervention in Cuba, a cover and deception plan to include requisite preliminary actions, such as has been developed in response to Task 33, could be executed as an initial effort to provoke Cuban reactions. Harassment plus deceptive actions to convince the Cubans of imminent invasion would be emphasized. Our military posture throughout execution of the plan will allow a rapid change from exercise to intervention if Cuban response justifies. Now, here is some of the, suggestions that they have for creating this false problem reaction solution scenario. And that's essentially what it is. When you want to invade another country and you're trying to come up with a false pretense to do so, this is what a false flag attack is, where you fly the flags of another country. And this is why we often talk about problem reaction solution. Because if you want to invade, but you can't yet, you don't have the excuse, well, what you have to do is create a problem. Like some of the suggestions we're about to read in this declassified document. You then generate a desired reaction to the problem, which is military men, media people, the general population sees this and says, oh my, we got to do something about this. And then you offer the solution to this very problem that you created, and the solution is what you wanted all along. We need to invade Cuba because you saw what they did, didn't you? And then you get the Western world behind your whole plan to invade, and that was the point all along. So let's look at some of the plans they had to do this back then, and we can extrapolate how that could be carried out in today's world. They could land friendly Cubans in uniform over the fence to stage an attack on base. They could capture Cuban-friendly saboteurs inside the base. They could start riots near the base's main gate. They could sink a ship near the harbor entrance, conduct funerals for mock victims. Here's where it gets wild, guys. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. We could blow up a drone, an unmanned vessel. I'll remind you, this is in 1962 that this declassified plan, that this plan was was proposed. 1962, they had these drones. We could blow up an unmanned drone vessel anywhere in the Cuban waters. We could arrange to cause such incident in the vicinity of Havana or Santiago as a spectacular result of a Cuban attack from air or sea or both. The presence of Cuban planes or ships merely investigating the intent of the vessel could be fairly compelling evidence that the ship was taken under attack. The nearness to Havana or Santiago would add credibility, especially to those people that might have heard the blast or who have seen the fire. The U.S. could follow up with an air-sea rescue operation covered by U.S. fighters to evacuate remaining members of this non-existent crew. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in Florida cities, or even in Washington. I will remind you, this is the U.S. government proposing this plan to launch a communist Cuban terror campaign in Miami or Florida or Washington. Don't underestimate the levels that your deep state will go to here to gain a tight grip of control, guys. The terror campaign could be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the United States. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated, they say. Exploding a few plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots, the arrest of Cuban agents, and the release of prepared documents substantiating Cuban involvement also would be helpful in projecting the idea of an irresponsible government. Here's where it gets really wild, guys. Use of MiG-type aircraft by U.S. pilots could provide additional provocation. Harassment of civil air, attacks on surface shipping, and destruction of U.S. military drone aircrafts by MiG-type planes would be useful as complementary actions. An F-86 properly painted would convince air passengers that they saw a Cuban MiG, especially if the pilot of the transport were to announce such a fact. The primary drawback to this suggestion appears to be the security risk inherent in obtaining or modifying an aircraft. However, reasonable copies of the MiG could be produced from U.S. resources in about 3 months. They're saying, we understand the risks of setting up a phony fake plane, but we know how to do this. We could do it quickly. They go on to say it is possible to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a chartered civil airliner en route from the United States to Jamaica, Guatemala, Panama, or Venezuela. Here's where the plan gets incredibly revealing, and where you could see how it was rejected in 1962. I think it was Kennedy who didn't sign off on this and rejected the plan. But obviously, this way of thinking has not gone away. So check this out. An aircraft at Elgin AFB would be painted and numbered as an exact duplicate for a civil registered aircraft belonging to a CIA proprietary organization in the Miami area. At a designated time, the duplicate would be substituted for the actual civil aircraft and would be loaded with the selected passengers, all boarded under carefully prepared aliases. The actual registered aircraft would be converted to a drone. Takeoff times of the drone aircraft and the actual aircraft will be scheduled to allow a rendezvous south of Florida. From the rendezvous point, the passenger carrying aircraft will descend to minimum altitude and go directly into an auxiliary field at Elgin Air Force Base, where arrangements will have been made to evacuate the passengers and return the aircraft to its original status. The drone aircraft, meanwhile, will continue to fly the filed flight plan. When over Cuba, the drone will begin transmitting on the international distress frequency a Mayday message stating that he is under attack by Cuban MiG aircraft. The transmission will be interrupted by the destruction of the aircraft, which will be triggered by a radio signal. This will allow ICAO radio this will allow them to essentially, think that they are the ones calling it in. It goes on to say, thinking they saw it, themselves, and they're the ones first reporting it. But here it is. Here's the part that I was trying to point out to this guy who claims that he found all the parts of the plane inside the Pentagon when there's obviously no such thing occurred. We see here, on one such flight, a pre-briefed pilot would fly tail end Charlie at considerable intervals between aircraft. While near Cuban Island, this pilot would broadcast that he had been jumped by MiGs and was going down. No other calls would be made. The pilot would then fly directly west at extremely low altitude and land at a secured base in Elgin Auxiliary. The aircraft would be met by the proper people, quickly stored and given a new tail number. The pilot who had performed the mission under an alias would resume his proper identity and return to his normal place of business. The pilot and aircraft would then have disappeared. At precisely the same time that the aircraft was presumably shot down, here we go, guys, a small submarine or small surface craft would disperse F-101 parts, parachutes, etc., at approximately 15 to 20 miles off of the Cuban coast and depart. The pilots returning to Homestead would have a true story, as far as they knew. Search ships and aircraft could be dispatched, and parts of the aircraft could be found. Ladies and gentlemen, they have just outlined a plan here to falsely pretend that one of their airplanes was blown up, actually have it land in a prepared rendezvous place, have a submarine disperse parts into the coast to have these legitimate pilots and military men finding this stuff. And as the document itself says, as far as they would know, they would have a very true story. So this is exactly what I was trying to point out to this gentleman here, where I'm not calling him a liar. I don't doubt that he found these things. As far as he knows, this entire thing is completely true. But what's to stop the U.S. government from utilizing a plan such as has been outlined in the declassified document known as Operation Northwoods? And what's to stop them from not doing a similar thing on 9/11? I think this man's cognitive dissonance must have just kicked into just a scary level, because everybody knows there's zero footage of a plane hitting the Pentagon. The parts that could be found were light enough to be, picked up by hand, as being seen in many FBI photos. And the very fact that a very similar plan has already been declassified, proving that the U.S. government is actually willing to do these types of things, you would think this is something that this gentleman would want to look at. But no, he hid and deleted my comment because he said, he's going to block truther replies and keep them hidden. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention, ladies and gentlemen, and maybe we could share this with him as well, although that will probably only result in myself or yourself being blocked if you try to share this information with him, because the cognitive dissonance within these men is very thick. But I just wanted to point out to you today the very real, true, scary reality of Operation Northwoods, this declassified military document which shows blatantly how they attempt to utilize false flag attacks for the justification of military intervention in a country that they want to go against, And then what happened after 9/11? We had the lies of weapons of mass destruction. We had the invasion of pretty much the entire Middle East, which is continuing to this day. So this is of incredible importance that we continue to expose this for what it is. Again, guys, I want to remind you to watch my film, and if you haven't, make sure you do, but especially share it. This information is absolutely vital to get out there, guys, because this is absolutely key to understand. If you understand what the government was capable of doing on 9/11, then you're going to have a better understanding of what may be soon coming down the pike. So I just wanted to bring all of that to your attention today, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, if you do appreciate my efforts to do so, don't forget to check me out here at Subscribestar. $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever is within your means is very, very greatly appreciated. Again, I can't continue to go on doing this work without the support that comes directly from you, the viewers. So thank you so much to everybody who takes 1 minute to sign up at Subscribestar today. You can click the top link in the description below. That's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to share this video, click the thumbs up button, and stay tuned. We're going to have more video reports coming soon, God willing. This is Dan Dicks reporting for Press for Truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.